Hey YouTube, this is Lucky Man Survival here. My name is John, and today we're going to be giving you guys a little bit of an insight into our lives and why we began our preparedness journey. Now, when we're talking about preparedness, we're talking about, the things we do in our everyday lives to get us ready for any situations that may arise or just in everyday life. So in this video, we did a few questions that we're going to be answering today to give you guys a little bit more of a look into what caused us to be prepared. All right, so let's get to it. Now, let's start with my COVID story. Now, in March of 2020, my family was living in Bensalem, Pennsylvania at the time, and I remember working a job, and we were watching the news about how scary COVID was, and everyone was freaking out about it. We didn't know what it was, and all we knew was that people were dying. The numbers that were happening on the news were terrifying, to say the least. And, in my lifetime, I had never experienced anything like that. And all of a sudden, one day, boom, we had lockdowns. And I realized very quickly that my family didn't have a lot of food, a lot of water, hygiene and toiletries, like the great toilet paper shortage. So what really made me realize is when a scenario like that happened, I was very, very much unprepared. And I had a 3-year-old kid at the time and my brand new wife who were struggling to find food and water and just everyday necessities to keep us, alive and okay. And we were going to the stores, we couldn't find anything. And I remember the things that were missing: bottled water, canned goods, dried beans and rice, toilet paper, hygiene products, tampons, things like that. And they were wiped clean. And I just remember feeling so helpless to what my family was going through. And I remember the panic that I felt and going, I will never let that happen again. So to answer the next question, what I'm preparing for, mine is a little bit more of an open-ended question because I don't prepare like those TV shows like Doomsday Preppers and things like that. For me, it's more of an everyday life. Where I live now, I live in southern Utah. So we have issues like weather events. We have really, really bad winters. And not to mention, luckily for me, the community I'm in, we have a lot of preparedness-minded people around. So for me, it's not a big thing, but I prepare more for the things that life throws at me. Things like financial loss, self-defense situations that can happen at a moment's notice. And another thing that I prepare for in my personal life is because I do medical transport, I have patients I have to be concerned about every day. So I have, gained more knowledge with medical field. I carry certain things that I personally provided for myself to make sure that I can take care of these people that I'm in charge of helping and getting them safely to their doctor's appointments and stuff like that. So for me, I always try to get myself prepared in the little things in life, like having a car kit with candles, maybe glow sticks, bottled water, food, things of that nature. For me, I carry a firearm every single day. So I'm always prepared when it comes to self-defense situations, and I have gotten proper training to do so. So for me, it's self-defense is a very big part of my life, but also the everyday life, having a flashlight, being able to open an envelope. I mean, the list can be as small or as big as you want, but uh, but when it came to my family, I had a general anxiety after experiencing what happened with COVID. So I try to focus on ensuring that the things that I witnessed don't happen again. So I make sure that we have food, we have water, self-defense situations are covered in our household. We have security cameras. But another thing is we also prep financially, trying to save money as much as we can, make sure that we are set for certain things that may become financial issues. Just recently, me and my wife are found out we're pregnant. So she's a stay-at-home mom, and she stays home and takes care of our wonderful son. But she's also about to give birth to my other child. So I am the main provider for the household. So we have to focus a lot on the saving aspect and getting ourselves prepared in that way. so that little things like needing a tire or something don't break us financially and really start to shake our financial stability. Um, Now, granted, I try to get away from the mindset of a doomsday prepper where I'm going, oh, the sky is falling, sky is falling. But at the end of the day, it's really hard to do that because when you get into this mindset, you begin to see the world for what it is. And I do prepare for an SHTF situation like a lot of us do. But for mine, it's to make sure my family's okay, that they're well fed, that they have all the defensive things they need. But I also try to build a community around me, my friends, my family. A lot of us do that. So that is how I fend myself off of the issues at hand, because I actually invest time and energy into ensuring that the people in my life and myself are prepared for situations that may come without having the anxiety part of it. I do things incrementally. I don't let the world, overwhelm me. I don't watch news and things like that really get my blood boiling. I know that when I first started really getting into preparedness, I allowed the anxiety and the anger and the scarcity to really ramp up my prepping. But then I realized, there's only a certain level you can get to before you go, I'm controlling as much as I can, and I'm allowing myself to do the things I need to take care of my family. But if something happens, this is where I'm at, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. So I don't allow myself to think the sky is falling, the world is ending every 5 minutes. Fear porn is not something that you should have in your life, because anxiety is a real thing for a lot of people in our community. And, I'm here to tell you that there is a very sensible way to do it without having to concern yourself so much. But for me, my primary goal is to keep my family alive, keep myself alive, and live the best life I can. Now, for what got me into survival and preparedness, at a very young age, I was raised in a very conservative household. I had family and friends who went hunting, enjoyed, shooting guns. A little fun side note, when I was a lot younger, between the ages of about 8 to 12, me and my friends would always go outside and play zombie tag, which was the funnest game I could ever remember playing. But when, you're a kid and you have a fun imagination, you let it run wild. So we would go outside and we'd, have BB gun wars, and we'd set up tents, and we would start fires and all sorts of crazy stuff. And even though we were having fun, very quickly we learned real survival skills. We learned how to, get water out of certain taps, learning using a silcock key, things that you wouldn't think would resonate with you as an adult are some of the biggest lessons I learned when I was younger. Now, for me, I have always been a very outdoorsy person. I love camping, I love fishing, I love hunting. So for me, being in the outdoors is an everyday part of my life as much as I can try to make it. So for me, I had to learn the survival aspect of it to make sure that I was being safe when I was going out, learning how to start fires, learning how to identify edibles and things like that wouldn't make me sick. So it's a broad spectrum of what got me into it. But for me, it was more of my childhood. I was more of an outdoorsy kid. I had family and friends that went hunting, fishing, camping, all that stuff. So that's where my primary buildup of my survival and preparedness ideologies come from. But what really ramped me up was, one, COVID and things like that. That's when I really began doing things like building a food pantry, maybe having extra lights and flashlights, which if you guys have watched our channel enough, I'm the flashlight guy. I love my flashlights. But those are things that I kind of learned more as I got older. But for me, the biggest aspect that really got me into preparedness was moving to a state where I had never really ran into weather conditions until now. I grew up in Las Vegas, so, it was hot or it was not so hot. Not a big deal. But when you grow up, there, you're not used to snow. You're not used to things that really affect you on a day to day basis. But when I moved to Utah, I learned really quickly how much the average person has to be prepared, or else they may have an issue. For me, I learned about how bad winters were, frozen pipes, keeping yourself warm, having extra ways to cook in your household, keeping yourself warm with blankets, and getting into a room with your family and sealing it off, using the oven to warm you up, how to even find ways to light your home, solar generators, regular generators. I wasn't really around a lot of that stuff, so I had to learn that idea when I moved here, because if not, most people here have that stuff on hand because of how bad our winters are. We snow about 4 to 6 months out of the year. So you really have to put that into perspective when it comes to preparedness. If you don't have that stuff and your power goes out for 2 or 3 days, you're screwed. So for me, my preparedness started when I was a kid, really ramped up during COVID. But once I moved and my lifestyle changed a little bit, that's where the primary aspects for me happened. So my interest in history. Now, for me, it was coming up in somewhat of a conservative household, especially during my high school years and a little bit beyond. I quickly realized how the world was around me, and realized once I became an adult that I had a voice in the world. So I really began looking into politics and understanding how the world, turns, to get me a better example of how to, vote and lead and stuff like that. But for me, a lot of my history comes from the understanding of how civilizations in the past have crumbled. A good example is Rome. They were the pinnacle of the modern age during their time, and people believed that they would have 1,000-year reign because of how wonderful it was when it first began. But through famines, corruption, political divide, and things that we see every day now happened then, and just as quickly as Rome gained power, it also crumbled. We've seen many empires throughout our history crumble, and all of it seems to be the same thing: political divide, famines, economic collapses, things like that. So, we have to look at history and realize that it repeats itself. Think about Argentina back in 2001 when they had their financial crash that led so many people to be basically bankrupt, and crime went rampant in the streets. They had political division. People were starving to death. That happened not too long ago, and during COVID, it almost happened again. So understanding that history repeats itself is not so much to scare you, but to realize that these are lessons that we can learn to try and better ourselves for tomorrow. Now, another thing that I really enjoyed doing was looking into world wars, especially because we seem to be the most hot-headed world nowadays. We have wars with China and Taiwan, Ukraine and Russia, Israelis versus the Palestinians. We have all sorts of issues going on that really ramp up for what? But the way that wars have worked around, it's always around financial gain, economic collapses, political divisions, corruption. That raises a red flag for us to look into. So I wanted to learn about these things so that I could see the signs for what could come. Now, another thing that I did look into, which was more about the oncoming growth of the United States back in 1776 when we became independent from the crown, and realizing what we had to do and how we fought to gain our freedom. When we fought for our freedoms, we not only had to defend ourselves, but we were average Joes defending ourselves against the greatest naval military the world had ever seen. And a bunch of country boys with pitchforks and muskets ran them over, all because they knew how to survive. They had survival skills. They did things like guerrilla warfare. So learning tactics like that, I felt, is very important to learn. So when you look at how things have happened in the world and seeing what people have done to counteract those things, you take that and you learn from it, and it gives you a benchmark of where to start. For me, I've learned martial arts. I've learned self-defense. I'm an avid shooter. I am currently going to school to be a gunsmith. So there are things that I'm doing in my everyday life that our forefathers did that was just an everyday occurrence to them. But in our modern day, we're so soft that we really had to regain those skills and learn it as almost like a hobby instead of it living it day to day. So that is what got me into history. Some of the channels that got me started. Now, when I became a little bit more into preparedness, first place I went, just like a lot of us do, is went straight to YouTube. And I started looking up things. How do I do this? How do I do that? And just kind of gave myself an overall understanding of what I could do. And there were some people and some channels that I really got involved in that helped me grow, not only as a as a prepper, but as someone who, gets more involved in everyday life. So I am going to mention a few of these channels, and this is going to be basically my way of thanking these channels for everything they've done for me. The first one I want to touch on is Sensible Prepper. Robbie Wheaton and Don are two of the greatest people when it comes to preparedness and survival on YouTube. I follow them all the time. I watch all of their Tuesday lives for their preparedness school. And, they really made me realize that it's not about gearing up for a war. It's living day to day and knowing that things you can do in your life change and you have to be prepared to change with it. And preparedness is a great way to counteract that. So to them, I say thank you. So the next one I'm going to talk about is Canadian Prepper. Now, he is one of the channels that got me really started in the preparedness journey. I like him so much because, one, he doesn't hold any punches. He gives it to you raw, and he's not afraid to, talk about things that might make you a little spooked because he wants you to be informed. He wants you to prepare, and he wants you to understand the importance of preparedness in everyday life. So he really ramps up a lot of the things that I kind of focus on, things like food storage, defense, things of that nature. Now, another thing that I really like about him is he talks about winter preparedness. For me, that was really important, especially when I moved to Utah. So to him, I also say thank you. Now, the next channel that I'm going to talk about is City Prepping. Now, Chris there over at City Prepping does a fantastic job at giving the everyday person a wonderful step-by-step instructions on how to be a good prepper and a good overall person in your life. One thing that really made me kind of gravitate towards his channel was the fact that he doesn't allow the anxiety to overwhelm him in life. And let me tell you, if you guys are starting in your journey of preparedness as well, you'll understand that anxiety just kind of comes with the territory. So learning how to overcome that and understand what you can do, what you can't do, what you can control, what you can't control. It's a good way to keep you mentally fit and help you along with your journey. Another thing that I like about his channel is that he has the most unbiased opinion that I've ever seen on a channel. And I know that he works really hard on that. So we just want you to know, Chris, that you guys do a wonderful job over there and we appreciate you. And basically, guys, that's going to be all the channels that, help me out. Now, in conclusion, people have been through disasters and they could have safeguarded themselves with just a little bit of preparedness and really understanding ways to keep themselves safe and alive during more harsh events that may happen. Now, if some people who have gone through some really terrible things had things like a bug out plan, or maybe had their car ready for the weather that they're going to anticipate, there are things that people can do to really keep themselves safe in bad, dire situations. So for me, I think preparedness is one of the most important things for everyday life, but also for the average person who may only be relying on themselves for their survival. Now, talking about things like the Texas power outages, or even things like Hurricane Katrina, there were things that people could have done to protect themselves. There were some people during those times that had generators and were prepared that realistically, uh, for a lack of better words, handled the storm or weathered the storm. But for some people who lost their lives, they weren't so lucky. So I think that preparedness is something we need to not only take for ourselves to protect the ones that we love, but also to make sure that we can do everything we can to extend our lives and live to a better tomorrow. All right, guys. Well, that's all we have for you today. This is Lucky Man Survival. If you guys liked the video, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe. We'd love to hear from you guys. And remember, death is the rule, but survival is the exception. You guys have a good night.